Welcome to this week's episode of Jet Lag in the News. I'm Steve Jasper and I'm the jet lag guy. First up, I want to talk about the recent Air India flight AI-171, the crash in Ahmedabad, which claimed the lives of so far 270 people, including several who were on a hostel housing medical staff and students on the ground. Our sympathies go out to all the family members and friends who lost their loved ones in this terrible crash. And the plane had taken off from Ahmedabad and was bound for London Gatwick when it crashed shortly after takeoff into the hostel for medical students and doctors at BJ Medical College and Civil Hospital. So it was an absolutely tragic event. There was one survivor who was extremely lucky, and sadly his brother perished next to him. So the investigation is ongoing. It could take some time, potentially even a couple of years. So the authorities have found a black box, which should be very helpful for the investigation, but it is far too early at this point to comment on the possible cause of the crash at this time. Now, I had spoken previously about Air India in my podcast episode back on the 28th of May 2025, so just a few weeks ago. Where one of their pilots, who was 28, I may have gotten his age wrong, died of a heart attack after safely landing a plane coming in from Srinagar to Delhi airport. And at the time, there was a question of stress and possibly jet lag being a factor. And there have been concerns in amongst Air India aircrew about the amount of work hours and stress, time zones, etc. So the Director of General of Civil Aviation in India, so DGCA, is proposing stricter limits on aircrew flying times to minimise fatigue, increase rest, reducing the amount of night flying. So jet lag and fatigue are literal killers for both aircrew and passengers, so it is good to see the authorities take this seriously. Over to another story. Last week, The Guardian reported that daylight savings has an impact economically in New South Wales. So what the study did was compare travel data on Opal cards and also phone data looking at nighttime movement when adult travel to a location and having that adult stay there for at least 15 minutes. So this was done at the change to and from daylight savings, so both April and November. So what they did was look at the data a week before the change and a week after the change. So comparing like with like. So the Opal data is metropolitan Sydney, Newcastle and the Hunter Valley, Wollongong and the Illawarra region, Central Coast and Lake Macquarie, the Blue Mountains and the Southern Highlands. So it does cover quite a lot of people. It's not regional, but it still does cover a population of over 6 million people. So good database there. The finding is that having the sunset moving forward or back an hour changes people's willingness to get out and about. And that's an interesting finding. And as I said before, having a daylight savings change is like a mini jet lag, but with a lot more people involved. So this may strengthen the position of people who want to be on daylight savings all year round. So that would be moving the time zone forward. In this case, we'd be moving New South Wales, Victoria, ACT and Tasmania to Universal Time plus 11. It's currently on plus 10. So interesting findings in terms of economic input and daylight saving. Finally, there's a trend to use methylene blue for jet lag. Now, this started with reports of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. adding some blue dye to his water, although he hasn't stated that he uses methylene blue publicly. And to be honest, RFK Jr. is not the first person I would turn to for medical advice. I would instead turn to registered health professionals. He said that himself during a House Appropriations Committee hearing, and his exact words were, "I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me." Now, methylene blue does have some medical uses, and I remember coming across it when I was working as a hospital pharmacist many moons ago. It's mostly used for cyanide and carbon monoxide poisoning. It uncouples these poisons from the hemoglobin in the red blood cells and allows them to function properly. So that's the mechanism of action for methylene blue. It's also used for a condition called methemoglobinemia, where the iron in the hemoglobin has become oxidized and needs to be brought back to its original oxidation state. Now, If you want to do drag as a blue-tongued lizard, it could be fun, it could work. I'm not going to judge that. However, methylene blue is not recommended for jet lag. There are no studies that I have seen supporting its use in jet lag, and honestly, I can't see a mechanism of action where it would be effective. So use other therapies instead. I would use light therapies instead. And I have a list of therapies in my book and jet lag, and you can get that and many other jet lag resources on my website, www.jetlagguide.com.au. And that's this week's Jet Lag in the News. I'm Steve Jasper. Thank you for your attention. Jetlagguide.com.au. And that's this week's